Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. My name is Anindya Restuviani, or you can call me Vivi, and I will be your moderator for today's event. So thank you all for joining us and participating in this discussion. Thank you to all of our panelists, and also thank you to Ambassador Kelly for making the time to open the session. Before I give the floor to Ambassador Kelly to give her keynote speech, let me introduce our participants to Southeast Asian Feminist Movement Network, or in short is CFEM Network. So CFEM itself based on our observation on how countries in Southeast Asia has faced different yet similar challenges with regards to human rights, democracy, and freedom of expressions and association. Women and feminist activists especially are more vulnerable to many types of violence and also discriminations, and gender-based violence is to name a few. Despite all of that, we also observe that the feminist movement itself nevertheless persists and also growing even stronger. So Jakarta Feminist Association, Gantala Press, and Chris Network, joined by 30 other organizations in Indonesia, the Philippines, and Malaysia, created CFAM Network that aims to work in upholding human rights and democracy in Southeast Asia through a feminist perspective. So today's discussions, we specifically want to highlight the grassroots feminist organizations' work during the global pandemic itself. And we have here 6 amazing panelists from feminist organizations representing Indonesia, the Philippines, and also Malaysia to share with us what are their challenges, how they overcome those challenges, and most importantly, on how together we can help and also amplify their work. Before we start the discussions, I also just want to emphasize that this discussions is a safe space for everyone involved, including participants, speakers, moderator, hosts, and organizers. So please be mindful on how we talk and also treat each other, being respectful and not using racial, sexist, misogynist, and any discriminatory slur is a must. The organizer reserves the right to reach the safe space. So if anyone here needs translation from Indonesia to English and vice versa, we have closed caption activated. So please turn on the closed caption on your bottom right of your Zoom screen. And I want to thank you so much to Kate for helping us with the closed caption itself. So I also just want to remind you, and if you have any questions along the discussion, please feel free to drop your questions to our chat box, who this question is for. So without further ado, I would like to invite Ambassador Kelly to give her keynote speech and to also open the discussion. The time is yours, Ambassador Kelly.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. For those of you who don't know me and who I haven't had the pleasure of speaking with previously, I'll just briefly introduce myself. My name is Deidre Kelly, and I'm Canada's ambassador to Asean. I have been in that role since October 2018, so just over 2 years. And during that time, I've had the opportunity to travel on numerous occasions to all of the ASEAN countries and to meet with not only government representatives and government organizations, but to make a difference in their communities and to create better opportunities for all within the ASEAN region. So to all of you that I have met before, hello again. And to those of you that I have not yet met, look forward to meeting you sometime in the future. I'd like to give a big shout out and many thanks to the Jakarta Feminist Association for putting together this event, reminding us that the time to end violence against women and girls is now, and not just once a year during the annual campaign of 16 days of activism, but really every day. It is an issue that we should be conscious of and diligent in terms of making progress. And we are all here today, I think, because we understand what the challenge is. We know about the high rates of sexual and gender-based violence. We know that an estimated 1 in 3 women experiences physical or sexual abuse in her lifetime. And unfortunately, it's most often by someone that is known to her, an intimate partner. And the chances are that, one or many of us in this group have been the victim of sexual violence or other violence, and likely at the hands of someone that was dear to us. Around the world, there are 120 million girls that have experienced forced sexual acts during their lives. And if we look at the prevalence of pornography and the easy access to pornography, and how sexual acts are portrayed, and how young people's perceptions of intimacy are skewed, I think chances are that the rates are only going to intensify. We also know that today there are over 650 million women around the world who were married as children and who lost the opportunity to pursue education and their own professional aspirations, their own dreams. And for every 3 months of lockdown, there will likely be an additional 15 million cases of gender-based violence. That is appalling. And too often, violence against women and girls is normalized, it's culturally acceptable, and it goes unpunished. More than ever, we have a responsibility as leaders, as active members of our community, as humans, to protect women, girls, and those who are most vulnerable against this type of violence, especially during trying times like the pandemic, when tensions and stresses are exacerbated. Often these vulnerable people become the outlets of frustration and scapegoat for every type of perceived challenge that exists in the household too often. Canada is committed to continuing to work to build evidence of what works and supporting those efforts. We have the political will, and that's a significant first step. And we also have the leadership and track record of women's rights organizations to build the types of partnerships and programs that are needed to accelerate action, and with the goal of eliminating all forms of violence against women, girls, and those most vulnerable. But that doesn't mean that we're perfect. And in Canada, we have our own unique challenges as well. For example, there is the particular plight of Aboriginal women in Canada and elevated levels of discrimination and violence that they face. And so that is a unique challenge, for example, that in Canada we are tackling and trying to overcome. I'm sure we are going to have a lot to take away from today's discussion, and especially from our collective experiences. And to complement your own examples, I'd like to share with you a few initiatives that Canada has taken, both in the region, but also elsewhere. Just yesterday, for example, our Minister of International Development, the Honorable Karina Gould, she announced at a high-level global conference on strengthening women's roles in building and sustaining peace, which was hosted by Vietnam and the United Nations, that Canada is going to give another $8.5 million to UN Women to empower women to prevent violence and promote social cohesion in the Asean region. We are extremely proud of that project. It's something that we have been working on for some time, and felt that the need was only intensified given the exacerbations created by the pandemic. We have also considerably enhanced our leadership at multiple levels on gender equality and empowerment of women, beginning with our feminist foreign policy and a feminist international assistance policy. And I take as a positive sign that Many governments in the region have expressed that they are keen to learn from Canada's experience, but also to share their own experiences and to try to achieve progress in these areas. We recognize that achieving results requires investing in prevention and response, and also supporting transformational change to shift social norms and power relations. Eliminating sexual and gender-based violence in all forms and in all settings, including supporting survivors and holding perpetrators to account, is a priority for Canada. And we are advancing this comprehensively through multi-sectoral programming, and we have integrated it across our international assistance programs in areas such as health, education, and inclusive governance. And it's a central element of our gender responsive humanitarian action and a key element of our own national action plan on women, peace, and security. With regard to programming, just this morning, in fact, I received a message, as did all heads of mission, advising that moving forward, there will be insertion of new language and contribution agreements with implementing partners, with consequences for instances related to instances of sexual misconduct. And that's a big step in terms of eliminating some of the harassment and violence and discrimination that would be privy in the workplace, and trying to ensure that we are not inadvertently supporting those types of actions, but also sending a signal to victims and potential victims that we're on their side and that this action is just simply not tolerated. Within the ASEAN context, in addition to the project that I mentioned, our new announcement yesterday, and some of the work that we've been doing on women, peace, and security, gender equality and the elimination of gender-based violence and sexual violence has been a focal point of our local programming initiatives. And this has been supported by bilateral initiatives as well as multinational initiatives that have been implemented by Canada across the region. An example of one of our signature initiatives is something called Her Voice, Her Choice, which is a commitment over 3 years to support sexual and reproductive health initiatives. We have also made significant investments internationally in women's rights organizations, including, and this could be of interest to you, the Women's Voice and Leadership Program, as well as the Equality Fund, which is aimed at creating new global platforms to ensure sustainable and predictable support for women's organizations and movements, recognizing that often your support and funding mechanisms are project to project. And I'm happy to announce that as a result of these initiatives, we are seeing results. And to date, there have been over 400,000 people that have been reached by our programming and from our assistance. So that's remarkable, but there's still a long way to go. And going back to the specific issue that Canada faces, in 2019, our Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, welcomed the release of the final report on the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, which fulfills the important mandate of the Commission to recommend concrete action to remove systemic causes of violence and increase the safety of Indigenous women and girls. And what that report demonstrated is that there is a lot to do, and there is progress that has been accomplished, but like elsewhere in the world, has been slowed down due to the pandemic. Again, today we have come here to share our experiences and to build on existing work that we have been doing together, and to help build the partnerships and platforms that this sector needs to accelerate action and enhance collective impact of the work. Because really that is what is important, is not only raising awareness, but moving allies and supporters into action so that we can see results of our collective efforts. And I am so inspired and eager to join forces with you and to multiply our efforts, and would please ask that if you have suggestions or ideas for how the mission of Canada to ASEAN can be of assistance, please do not hesitate to reach out. I encourage you to meet up with old allies, discover new ones, to learn about innovative approaches, and let's all develop some best practices and identify the most effective means for eliminating violence against women and girls. So I don't want to go on much longer. As you noted at the beginning, it can be very challenging as a moderator to keep people's attention and to prevent them from dozing off. And part of that is to ensure that the panelists and speakers do not give very dry speeches. So I am going to cut mine off at that point and turn over to the other panelists, open the session, and look forward to sharing our exchanges. Thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Callie, for opening the discussion, and especially for your support to the feminist movement, especially in Southeast Asia. And as we all hear, and it has been emphasized by Ambassador Callie before, that yes, women has been one of the most vulnerable group in terms of gender-based violence, and especially when the pandemic itself only making it worse. So today, let's discuss on how this grassroots organization work in this situation. So let me introduce you to our 6 amazing panelists that I believe that all of the 6 panelists are here already. So from Malaysia, we have Rian Wong from Stand Up Malaysia, and also Nisa Rawi from Chris Network. And from Indonesia, we have Niputu Chandra Dewi from Bumi Setara, and also Vira Fitri Fitria from Organisasi Disabilitas Tuban. And from the Philippines, we have Hannah May from Sulong, and also Faye Kura from Gantala Press. So without further ado, so let's dive into our first questions. I do want to start with Rian, actually, from Stand Up Malaysia. So Rian, to open this discussion, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your organization, and maybe give us a brief idea on how the pandemic itself has affected the work of your organization, and how has your organization managed to continue doing its works during the pandemic.
Thank you so much. I just want to first thank Jakarta Feminist for hosting this amazing talk together with Chris Network. So Stand Up Malaysia is an organization that advocates against sexual and gender-based violence, but we are starting at the beginning point where it's education. So when we first started out, we realized, hey, at that time there were not, as the term is coined, social justice slides on Instagram. So especially in Malaysia. So we just started out with this maintaining information to the young people about sexual and gender-based violence. Our core mission is to create safe spaces online and offline. We also do this by hosting school workshops, but however, due to the pandemic, that has affected how we work as a team and how we carry out projects as well, especially our advocacy work. So we had to obviously halt every in-person workshop that we have planned and moved everything online. I have to say, for the pandemic, I think many other organizations feel this way too, because grassroots is, you're at the front line of touching people's lives. You're not making fancy policies in parliament. You're at the front line emotionally as well. So when we shifted online, we had to ask ourselves, how do we create conversations that we can create offline, in a computer. So we one of our first projects was just hosting a series of webinars, and then Those series of webinars talked about consent, child marriage. We also talked about, male allyship in the feminist movement. We had guests from Philippines, we had guests from Indonesia, Jakarta. So we really sort of tried to open up the conversation online because we couldn't do it offline, right? And then when the numbers of cases in Malaysia were starting to go down, we launched another project called Laptop for Siswa and Jaga Siswa. So when the pandemic cases were rising again, our Ministry of Higher Education sort of backtracked on their decision to allow students to come into the university campuses to study. So some of these students, they were stranded. Some of them, they didn't have enough technology access to continue with online classes. So those were just one of our projects that helped them gain access to technology and, obviously help stranded students. Some of them couldn't afford rent or food, so we had some financial aid over there. And I think the reason as to why we sort of expanded out in from our mission is because we realized, especially the one with digital access, we realized that we're doing most of our advocacy work online. I'm sure many other organizations do, due to the resources. So we realized that, hey, in order to actually widen that feminist movement, we need to make sure that these people have access to the information at hand. And it's not just Stand Up that's doing the thing. It's not just Stand Up that's doing the initiative. There have been many other organizations in Malaysia who have provided digital access, who've provided cash aid. Many feminist organizations expanded those missions' core values to other initiatives. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and it's so interesting that how, like you mentioned about the social justice warrior or whatever it is that we were being called online. And I believe that all of us here in Indonesia also experienced the same. And yes, and I'm so happy to listen that, Stand Up Malaysia actually also, in some extent responding to COVID by doing the laptop untuk Siswa project itself. I think it's amazing. But I do want to go to Nisa from Chris Network. Nisa, Rian mentions about like the education part itself on how we can combat gender-based violence, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic through social media. Will you be willing to kind of give us as well a brief idea on first what is your organization and what are things that you do? And I know that Chris Networks also deal a lot with working with security for a woman as a human rights defender. So maybe you can give me a brief idea on how things are changed during the COVID-19, especially to the security of the woman as human rights defender itself.
Hi, I'm so sorry if the line gets stuck. Just let me know if I pause or stuff like that. I'll try to make it as smooth as possible. So I'm from Chris, and Chris, we do a lot of work on freedom of expression from a gender lens, and that means ensuring everyone, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, age, has equal access to freedom of expression. Now, facing our unprecedented times of COVID-19, it is much harder for grassroots feminists to be doing groundwork. We see government tightening regulation because things were so uncertain. There were a lot of fear among the public as well. And this fear is also weaponized by the government to legitimize authoritarian rules. And this pandemic also affects those with least resources, power, privileges, and access to education, healthcare, etc. In Malaysia, one of these groups are the migrants and refugees. And true enough, a crackdown against refugees and migrants actually took place on the 1st of May, which is ironic considering it was on Labor Day. A day meant to, appreciate the working class people, and yet our government took it upon them to only discriminate the exploited. The people were told that the gathering of the migrants was merely for testing and no arrest will be made. But it was clear that this was untrue and that it was a bigger situation than what we were told, especially when razor wires were put up surrounding the tagged locations. And it was reported by Al Jazeera that an estimated number of 700 migrants were arrested on the first crackdown, and more crackdowns continued happening. So this is an issue for us because we would like to voice it out, but the problem was that we have the pandemic. That's our huge barrier. So this led to the hashtag Migrant Juga Manusia, which directly translates to migrants are people too, which is a campaign and protest held by grassroots feminists. It was conducted in a way where there are no organizations involved, and the online protest was meant to be viewed as organic. A date and time was set and posted to spread it online for internet users to join. One of the reasons here was to avoid safety breach, especially as we are living in a coup government, not to mention a government that is looking at allocating a huge sum of money to spread online propaganda. Thus, it was important to us that the campaign and this protest was not traceable to anyone. So the day that the online protest started, it was amazing. The hashtag was populated with support, love, and affirming messages, and people created placards and artworks, and new voices and narratives surfaced. We were trending number one in Malaysia, basically. But the hate online was so overwhelming, and in a way that can be seen as a hijacking moment where the hashtag was filled with hate comments, the more it attracted tractions. And this was not good because eventually it became a concern when through Chris's monitoring observations that there were posts accusing migrant juga manusia of being a feminist agenda, which is not technically untrue. However, it is still worrying that even without trace, feminists become the target of accusations for state sanctions, especially when feminists are posting tweets in support of the migrants online, and people are tagging our police forces online. So that was a huge risk for us because as we enter, unfortunately, into this coup government, everything we say may be used against us, even though it can be counted as a valid criticism. So it was definitely a huge struggle for feminists in Malaysia, especially when we were doing that campaign and a lot of people's lives were at risk. And the feminist organizations and collectives and communities that were helping out refugees were in fear of being doxxed and also having the people the recipients getting doxxed. So promotions of like their initiatives were being stopped or at least slowed down so that they would prevent anything that could risk their safety. So that was part of what amazing thing Malaysian feminists did, but also one of the most riskiest thing we did as well because it was online.
Thank you, Nisa. Yes, it's amazing things that Chris Network has done, especially during this very difficult time. And I also agree with the online situation with the pandemic. A lot of people think that all the threat, all the like the challenges will stop, and especially the violence will stop. But in a sense, it doesn't stop. It just changed to like another types or another platform, which is sad. But let's go, before we go deeper on all of the information that Nisa and also Rian already provide us with the situation in Malaysia, let's go to the Philippines. I feel like I'm traveling and it's so good. It feels nice to feel like traveling when you can. So let's go to the Philippines. We have Hannah here from Sulong. Hannah, would you be willing to give us a little bit of descriptions on what is your organization and maybe what are the challenges that you have faced and how do you overcome the challenges during the pandemic itself?
So, hello everybody, and I am Hannah Mito Balanal from the Philippines, proud to represent Sulong, which is a youth-led organization that provides free pro bono legal advice, psychological aid, and other services to victims survivors of sexual harassment and violence. Now, I'm going to give you a completely different perspective about this because our initiative actually started during the COVID-19 pandemic. So formerly Project Sulong, now Sulong, started when the hashtag Ihako trended in our country way back June. Now, during that time, hija, meaning daughter in Spanish, was used to belittle a woman's opinion against sexual harassment and violence. The said hashtag became a movement to reignite the discussion to fight and end rape culture, and therefore the Filipino community on various social media platforms was inspired to share their stories of sexual harassment and violence. So, for so long, it was not difficult to launch the initiative as there were a lot of causes that we are advocating about, and all of these issues are prevailing challenges that surfaced even more during the pandemic, but is actually already present and are faced by the society already. Looking at it on a brighter side, the pandemic gave us somewhat an opportunity to finally push the initiative through, not only because we are advocates, but also because this culture of denial, the culture of victim blaming, slut shaming, of course, sexual objectification and trivialization needs to end, and we have to take big strides and step up. Now, the primary initiative, which provides free legal and psychosocial aid to victim survivors, were easy because COVID-19 shifted the world online, and our country really took advantage of the internet. In our part, it was an advantage as we were able to provide these services for free. It cost us less in terms of labor and expenses. And most importantly, we were able to reach out to many regions across the country, making our services available to them despite our distance. However, what's made it difficult is that it was difficult for us to reach out the marginalized sector, knowing that socioeconomic factors also affects one's vulnerability to sexual violence. We still cannot say that our online platform is available to everybody because the reality here in the Philippines, and I think to Southeast Asian countries as well, is that not everyone still gets to have access to internet, or sometimes not everybody even have a gadget to use. But nevertheless, we are using these challenges as our current motivators to improve our organization and in the long run, fill the gaps that we are experiencing today one step at a time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannah. It's amazing. We do need more advocates who can do pro bono in terms of, defending, especially victims of gender-based violence. And I think a lot of like in Indonesia as well, we will talk with Chandra, who is also, I think Chandra is a legal advocate as well. But we will talk to Chandra later about this. But before we go to Indonesia, I do wanted to ask Faye as well, because I know that Gantala, as a grassroots organization and work with a lot of grassroots organization and also providing a lot of information, especially to outside of the Philippines on the conditions and also situations of what is going on about the human rights violation itself in the Philippines. But with Faye, I do want to ask you, like, how is like the specific, violations that is occurring in the Philippines, especially to women as human rights defender itself? Faye, are you there? Hi, Faye.
Hi. I think I lost my connection.
Okay, so do you need me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
It's okay. This is the art of online discussion. I love it. But okay, so the question is more like, like how Gantala has been, like using your platform to amplify the any information or anything done by grassroots organization, especially feminist grassroots organization. So maybe you can give us a little bit of brief of course, like what Gantala Press has been doing, but also on, like what is the, like the occurring incidents that is currently being faced by women as human rights defenders in the Philippines itself.
So I think I might lose my connection again in the course of me speaking, but so please bear with me. Maybe okay. So here in the Philippines, maybe I should start by saying by describing what our group is. our organization and what we do. So we're a small press. We're a feminist literary collective, and we produce books and publications written or created by women. Recently, we've been working a lot with women from communities from the basic sectors, and we're also volunteering with a mass organization called the Amihan National Federation of Peasant Women. So we're helping them in their campaigns for peasant women, for the benefit of peasant women. And we're also partnering with other mass organizations and other art collectives in fighting for all of these issues in the Philippines. So in the Philippines during the pandemic, the we've seen how the capitalists and the powerful take advantage of the crisis, no? So they can stay in power after the crisis has passed. So there's this insistence by the government to implement the online learning, which we know is very discriminatory. Discriminatory towards children from the basic sectors, because they cannot afford all of these gadgets, all of the internet, and all of the equipment needed for online learning. That's one. So there's this shift towards what Joe Diding would call communicative capitalism. So and the government is really taking advantage of that, and they recently railroaded what is called the terror law. So it's a set of laws that really wants to control dissent here in the Philippines, and it's part of the government's massive anti-communist campaign. So they set up a task force to end. It's called the National Task Force to End Local Communist Conflict in the Philippines, and they're spending a large part of the people's money on that campaign and on that anti-communist campaign. Also, a lot of many human rights defenders have fallen victim to that what we call red tagging here in the Philippines now. So when the government through social media tags all of these dissenting activists and human rights defenders now, so they're being red tagged. So the peace consultant Randy Achanis has been murdered. Was murdered in August by state forces, and then his daughter Amanda, who's a peasant women organizer up north in the Philippines, was arrested also on trumped up charges, and they're non-bailable charges. No, so she's with her. When she was arrested, she was with her, I think 22-day-old baby boy. No, so the police arrested her, planted evidence in the house where they took her, and then they want to separate her from her baby, and everyone's afraid now because it might the experience might be similar to what they did to another human rights defender named Reina Minasino, who was also imprisoned, and then she also lost her baby when they took the baby away from her, and when the baby was buried, a swarm of military and policemen visited the burial of the place, no? Ano bang tawag dun? Lamayan. And intimidating Reina and intimidating all of the other human rights defenders, no? So that's the situation in the Philippines. It's really scary to be an activist, to be a human rights defender, because the government responds to dissent through wrongful arrests, through red tagging on social media, and through murder. No? So outright murder. Like one of the daughter of a congresswoman, they're from an indigenous group, in Mindanao. So the daughter joined the New People's Army, and she was killed in an encounter. And then the police used her body as a war trophy on social media. No, so it's the violence is blatant. The violence and harassment from the government is blatant, and so that's really the situation here. The government has been taking advantage of the pandemic to continuously silence the people. But of course, we know, no, especially among women, we know that we won't allow that. So there will always be human rights defenders to like for now, like now there's a massive campaign to free Amanda and her baby boy. So in short, the human rights defenders have the backs of the other human rights defenders who are being targeted by the government.
Thank you so much, Faye, for things that you work on, and also things that you taught us. Yeah, I think like one of the highlight that we see from the feminist movement, basically most of the human rights movement itself, that the solidarity itself is very, very strong. So it's sad to know that we have a friend of ours who needs to to kind of to be like threatened, but we know that other activists or other human rights defenders got our back. But again, I'm so sorry to hear all of this, and I pray for your safety and everyone else in the Philippines, and also in Malaysia, and also Indonesia. So let's go to Indonesia. We have Vira here, who is the founder of Organisasi Disabilitas Tuban. Hi Vira.
Hai.
So Vira, halo. So Vira, aku mau tanya dong sama Vira. So I'm gonna speak in bahasa Indonesia with Vira. Jadi Vira, apa namanya, kita tahu ya kalau misalkan saat di dalam situasi apapun teman-teman disabilitas, khususnya perempuan dengan disabilitas, itu pasti akan menjadi salah satu kelompok yang paling rentan dalam situasi apapun. Aku pengen Vira mungkin bisa memberikan sedikit penjelasan kepada kita. Pertama, apa sih sebetulnya Organisasi Disabilitas Tuban atau Orbit ini, dan juga mungkin memberikan gambaran ke kita situasi teman-teman perempuan dengan disabilitas selama pandemi ini, dan juga mungkin bagaimana situasinya dalam kekerasan berbasis gender kepada kita juga. Silakan Vira.
Terima kasih ya Jakarta Feminist atas kesempatan yang diberikan. Bangga bisa sharing cerita pada forum ini. Perkenalkan, nama saya Vira Fitria, saya seorang difabel cerebral palsy. Saya organisasi disabilitas. Apa itu Orbit? Orbit adalah sebuah organisasi disabilitas Tuban, di mana ini kami juga memperjuangkan tentang kesetaraan untuk teman-teman difabel. Kami berjuang dari akar rumput, lalu kami juga melakukan edukasi bagaimana seorang difabel itu harus mempunyai kapasitas lebih, kemudian berdaya dengan segala potensi yang ada. Karena kami percaya di balik keterbatasan pasti ada sebuah misalnya plusnya, seperti itu. Ada potensi yang perlu kita kembangkan, terlebih untuk teman difabel. Apalagi kita semua sudah tahu bagaimana disabilitas itu masih dianggap sebagai salah satu kelompok yang rentan, salah satu kelompok minoritas. Apalagi dengan adanya pandemi, adanya misalnya kita atau jaga jarak, tentu itu sesuatu yang bertolak belakang sebenarnya dengan disabilitas itu sendiri. Apalagi disabilitas berat, tentu mereka membutuhkan pertolongan, tentu mereka harus ada di sekitarnya agar istilahnya mengakomodir segala kebutuhan mereka. Terkait dengan disabilitas perempuan, itu juga menjadi fokus karena seperti kita ketahui disabilitas perempuan itu sangat rentan terhadap kekerasan yang berbasis gender, lalu kesempatan juga terbatas. Lalu kalau di Indonesia sendiri perempuan itu masih dianggap sekian, tapi itu
yang ini dimin dulu aja ya Pak ya. Nanti saya mau
semangat
bawa nggak usah dulu deh. Kayaknya kebanyakan air deh. Nggak usah deh.
Walaupun
Kayaknya kebanyakan
banyak
air
tantangan di depan, kami percaya gitu suatu saat perjuangan kami akan mendapatkan hasil yang kami impikan. Terlebih lagi untuk perempuan, kalau di Tuban sendiri itu bekerja di sektor informal. Jadi tentunya di era pandemi seperti ini sangat terasa sekali dampaknya. Oleh sebab itu kami terkadang melakukan sebuah inovasi-inovasi walaupun itu terkesan sederhana, walaupun itu terkesan kecil, tapi harapan kami itu membawa secercah harapan lah di tengah keterpurukan ini. Seperti itu yang bisa kami ceritakan. Terima kasih sekali lagi, mohon maaf. Selamat sore.
Oke, terima kasih banyak Vira. I think it was wonderful to hear Vira mention despite the challenges and also the limitation but also in general the pandemic itself Fira and also and her organization are still able to give a little bit of hopes, even though it's not much, but at least it gives a little bit of hopes to other people in their community. So let's go to Chandra. Chandra, also from Indonesia, from Bumi Setara. So hi Chandra, can you also basically also share disabilities, but maybe you can also add to what Fira already mentioned to us, and maybe if you have initiatives that you're doing during the pandemic itself, you can also share with us.
Okay, thank you, Vivi, for testing the microphone. Let me introduce myself. My name is Niputu Chandra Dewi. My friend usually call me Chandra. I'm a women human rights defender based in Bali Island, Indonesia. But in this forum, I on behalf of Bumi Setara. Bumi Setara in English called Equal Earth, social initiative platform for empowering people, especially girls and children with disabilities in Bali, and we using feminist perspective. Bumi Setara founded in 2016. It means in the next year, 2020, Bumi Setara will be 5 years. Actually, Bumi Setara using a digital platform to connecting the donators. We name them as a Kakak Bumi Setara. We connect Kakak Bumi Setara with our beneficiaries, students with disabilities, and majority girls with disabilities in Bali. That's our core program, but we also have another program like sexual right and reproductive education access for deaf people or deaf youth or hard of hearing people in Bali, because they lack of access of gender diversity and also a sexual orientation. We also using creative and fun way to make empowerment for both youth with disabilities and youth about inclusivity issues and disabilities issue in Bali, such like Mini Kino International Film Festival. In every year, we cooperate with this international short film festival to make an impact and raising awareness about accessibility to people not only in Bali. I believe this struggle or this event also making impact for people around the world because this is an international event. So during the pandemic of COVID-19, we also made a few initiatives like make made transparent masks for deaf people because they have such special needs. So they could read our lips uh, and we can communicate clearly with people with disabilities. On this case, with deaf people or hard of hearing. Another important challenge in this pandemic, just like first speaker mentioned about digital infrastructure, because our main event always about uh, education, especially in a formal education. And start from March, every school in Indonesia, not only school for disabilities or special needs children, also a regular school, hold their even or learning in home by digital platform. Not only about digital infrastructure like a laptop or Wi-Fi, but also our beneficiaries mostly come from vulnerable and underrepresented group. So their parents not uh, not do the formal job, but informal job like I don't know what call in English, like dagang buah or tukang parkir. So they actually they don't have time to assist their children. But on their case, for special needs children, uh, they need the assist the most by their parents or maybe by uh, the other family members. That's the challenge we meet the most in this pandemic. Okay, thank you, Fifi.
Thank you so much, Chandra. It's amazing those initiative. I think like this is one of the things why it is important to see everything with like the feminist lens itself. It is very important because not a lot of people are aware with the intersectionality and also things that people need if we don't see it through like feminist lens. The intersectionality, like the way that Chandra basically figure out, okay, if you are deaf and you will need to read people's lips, it is impossible if you're wearing masks and all of that stuff. The accessibility itself is very, very important. So I know we have a very limited time, and I do want to ask all of you one more questions. But before that, I want to ask the participants, if you have any questions, please drop it to our chat box. And everybody who also watched us from YouTube, you can also drop your question to the chat box on YouTube itself. So okay, so before maybe as a closing statement as well from each and every one of you, thank you so much for sharing your work and also sharing to us the challenges that you faced during the pandemic itself. But in retrospective, if what do you hope in the future after the pandemic is over? Is there any kind of other situation that you wish that you think will change after the pandemic, and also maybe give us help us to be able to understand what can we do to support your work and also to amplify things that you do in grassroots level itself. So maybe let's start with Hannah.
Ever since we started our initiative, we have been offering free legal and psychosocial aid to victims, survivors of sexual harassment and violence virtually. So that's one of the things that we want to see in the future, to make our services tangible, to make it available to not only for those who have access to internet connection, but also to the people who doesn't even know that what the concept of sexual violence and harassment is. Furthermore, one of the objectives of Sulong as an organization is to be politically involved in the near future. Although these are the only services that we offer for now, but in the near future, we would really love to work with organizations, with colleges, universities, schools, and corporations, even companies, to do policy recommendations in order for us to strengthen our stand in terms of the fight against gender-based violence, and of course to promote inclusivity as well. We are currently using our social media platforms to inform, educate, and inspire the community to end gender-based violence and promote social safe spaces for every individual. We do this by producing articles, launching campaigns, and various social media engagements for us to raise awareness. Sulong stands for many causes, and we are adamant in making sure that these advocacies, or our advocacies, are not only heard but also supported by many. Let me just share to everyone that since we have launched last June until the end of November, we have catered to 51 victim survivors, all of which we were able to provide free legal and psychological services respectively. So we keep these services free through our Survivor Solidarity Fund, which is funded through partnerships, internal contributions, and of course, public donations. Currently, we have 14 volunteer lawyers, 2 legal partner organizations, 2 psychosocial partner organizations, and 6 publicity partner organizations. The very thing that we are so proud of is that we have 102 members in total, which means that we were able to invite 102 advocates of feminism to join us in this movement to serve the community, to end gender-based violence and harassment, and most importantly, to foster gender equality for the society. Now, if there is one thing that Sulong would really love to look forward to in the near future, is it for our services to not exist anymore. It's because the moment that our services does not exist anymore, it means that there are no more victim survivors of sexual harassment and violence. And that's one thing that we are looking forward to as an organization, hopefully not only in our country, the Philippines, but also around the world. Thank you so much, and I hope that this activity of ours, this project of ours, starting discussions about organizations who are focused in feminist movements, will allow us to work together and see a beautiful world wherein sexual violence, gender-based violence does not occur anymore, because we for so long would love to see that future where we doesn't exist anymore, because we do not have to provide these services for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. That is such a beautiful last words. So I'm gonna go to Rianne. Maybe you can also tell us what are things that you will do differently after the pandemics, if you learn anything from it, and also what are things that we can do to support your work.
So I think for us, one of the main visions that or main goals that we're looking for next year is to um, sort of riding on the point that Hannah brought up earlier about not NGOs providing the services. We want to bridge the gap between survivors of gender-based violence and the government. And this needs political will, especially from the side of the government. So what Stand Up Malaysia wants to do is create mechanisms and train officers, whether it's in the police station, whether it's in the hospital, or whether it's in parliament itself, to shift that mindset of culture of victim blaming to saying that, hey, we need to listen to this person because this person is in pain. So we are trying our best to get ready that mechanism by next year, as well as educate school children to say, look, this is something that's not been talked about because culturally Asians don't talk about these things until recently, and we're still afraid of talking about it. So we need to be brave and we need to be bold about carrying these conversations through across all platforms, whether it's in person, or whether it's in real life. What I hope to see is that I believe that the feminist movement is actually doing very well in solidarity. You can see that across all countries, Malaysia, Philippines, and Indonesia, even in Thailand as well. But what I want to see, and this is all for those of you who are listening at home, I want to see government taking proactive action, listening to NGOs, not relying on them, but listening to NGOs to craft comprehensive policies and execute them well according to the advisors instead of, hey, we're just going to give NGOs some money and they're going to do all the work for us and wash their hands off. Governments, that the minor obligation of governments are not to just extract power from the people, but to say, hey, we've got the power from the people, we want the community to grow. But unfortunately, as you can see, the pandemic, governments all around the world didn't, their intentions are not as pure because politics, right? And I think Nisa and our friends from the Philippines has brought up that very fact. So what I also hope to see besides political will, it's also the will of the people. I believe that feminist organizations are actually quite the underlying basis of every social justice movement if you track back in history. But we want to see more people gathering into the feminist movement, not to say that, hey, I want to fight for this because it's a woman's issue. I want to fight for this because it's my issue too, because it's a human rights issue. And it's very inspiring to hear, especially from Fira in Indonesia, to see that hope anchored upon something so eternal, even though it may not be achieved in our lifetime, as well as Hannah from Philippines. So I want to encourage each and every one of you in solidarity, don't give up, keep fighting. And I know it's easier said than done, but I also want to say, we're here for you as well. We've got the CFAM, supporting you. Not just financially, but also emotionally and, through engaging with one another. I saw a question from Kate, which is how we're coping personally with the pandemic. To be very honest with you, I think all of us are having a very difficult time because we're online. I know I've had multiple emotional breakdowns saying that, I'm not doing enough during this pandemic. But I think for me, I just want to see. But when I see all these initiatives being started all around the Southeast Asian region, I'm very, very inspired. But I'm also very secured and relieved by the fact that feminists are taking the front line, like Nisa with the Migrant Juga Manusia movement. So yeah, I try to stay positive as much as I can. I just want to say to all of you, especially in those in the Philippines and Indonesia, I hope you stay positive with you, and I'm also praying for you in solidarity.
Thank you so much, Rian. Anissa, do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, she said everything. I think that was a really good point to make. But definitely after this whole entire, I think the pandemic has definitely woken us up with how privileged some of us are. And I think I would really love for us to be more inclusive. Hopefully, once all of this is over, I feel like CFAM, especially CFAM Jakarta, is doing such a good job at even having the subtitles, having the closed captions to consider all these things. And I feel like at the start of the pandemic, it wasn't something that at least me, my organizations and organizations that I know thought about or considered that, you know, there are people who do not have the same access as we do. And it's something that I wish we knew and took into consideration before the pandemic hit. You know, it took us like a pandemic, a whole virus for us to like realize this. And I really hope that this is no longer the case. Hopefully once everything is over. So that's what I would like to hope for our feminist organizations, collectives, and individuals.
Thank you, Niza. I totally agree. A lot of us definitely, sometimes even like big event, big organizations, sometimes they don't think about it. That's why like this, as I mentioned before, like the intersectionality, the feminist perspective needs to be in place. And I'm happy to know that everyone here already acknowledged that we need that. So because you mentioned Vira, so maybe let's go to Vira. Vira, boleh coba cerita, mungkin kasih tahu ke kita apa yang bisa kita di sini sama-sama lakukan untuk bisa mendukung kerja-kerja Vira dan juga teman-teman di Tuban.
Dalam waktu dekat ini Kak Vi, kami akan melakukan semacam pendampingan UMKM untuk teman-teman difabel. Kebetulan kalau di Orbit ini ada sekitar 4-5 orang perempuan yang tapi punya usaha aktif gitu loh, entah itu punya usaha camilan atau punya usaha menjahit, seperti itu. Nanti akan kami gabungkan menjadi satu sehingga itu semacam jadi kelompok kecil, dan di mana di situ mungkin harapannya dapat terlibat aktif walaupun mungkin dari kecil dulu, tapi nanti harapan kami suatu saat kami punya semacam kafe gitulah, kafe difabel di mana dapat mempekerjakan teman-teman disabilitas, karena itu bentuk dari pengalaman pribadi dan juga keprihatinan kami bagaimana teman-teman sulit sekali mengakses pekerjaan, terutama kalau di Indonesia masih mempertimbangkan klasifikasi semacam ijazah dan lain sebagainya, dan tentu itu sangat sulit diakses oleh mayoritas teman-teman difabel. Seperti itu, Kak Afi. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih, Vira. So yeah, thank you so much, Vira. So she basically mentioned that she's about to launch a new small project where she wants to empower women with disability on, you know, like helping them with basically the, what is it called, the enterprise and a small middle enterprise that they do, selling snacks and all of that stuff. So let's go to Chandra. So Chandra, also please tell us, is there any things that you will do differently after the pandemic? And also, what are things that we can do to support your work in Bali?
Okay, thank you, Vivi. This pandemic COVID-19 give us so many challenges. I hope for future in post pandemic, I think the stigmatis always part of our effort, because person with disabilities, especially women and girls, facing a double stigma as a second-class citizen and also karma pala in Bali, since Balinese people believe in karma pala or good and bad deeds that will influence our next life. In example, if someone born as a physical disability, so in his or in her past life, she was or he was a bad person, and that's make stigmatize more challenges and strengthen the stigmatis in Balinese people when they see a person with disability. second important thing, I think also about accessibilities, because probably digital shifting will make our life easier, but in same time also will make a deeper inequality, not just about a gadget or Wi-Fi access, but also deeper inequality about international gaps. And actually, this pandemic COVID-19 made Bumistara delay our so many our plan and our another program, because we focusing our budget for next year to our main program, our scholarship program, and people or donators, permanent donators, still believe in us, but another donators, not permanent donators, they they start focusing about pandemic, and that's the reason why we delay our another plan. So we hope in CFAM and our network could make a collaboration in next time, maybe in next year and post pandemic. So we could make more impact not only in Bali, but also in Indonesia and in ASEAN. Thank you, Vivi.
Thank you so much, Chandra. So Faye, last but not least, is there anything that, what are things that we can do to support your work in the Philippines?
So before that, I'd like to say that after the pandemic, it would be wonderful to have a world that is free of capitalism and patriarchy, because we have seen how a capitalist and patriarchal system has brought us to this crisis, no? And that very system has equipped our government to handle the crisis incompetently or badly. So that would be we'd like to see a world where we can all collectively live an equitable life, where everyone can get can live with enough resources to feed her family and lead a satisfactory and happy life. That's our goal in our long struggle. No? Even before the pandemic, this has always been our vision. So in order to get to that kind of world, I mean, we were able to manage the pandemic as a press, as a collective, as a small group, precisely because we joined a mass organization, precisely because we got involved in the national democratic struggle. So I think it's really important to join collectives. It's important to really engage with the issues, engage with society, and because that's where we also draw our strength. Answering Kate's question, that's where we draw our strength from collective work, from political work, from all the growth that we have as activists and as human rights defenders, as citizens who won't take things, sitting down. So it's also important to, we were like Gantala was, we're lucky because we were able to build strong relationships with different organizations and collectives and comrades before the pandemic. So we were able to continue those relationships, those working relationships during the pandemic. So I think that has really taught us the importance of building relationships, like this network that we're building now, the Southeast Asian Feminist Action Movement Network now. I'd like to share that when we here in the Philippines, when we asked for CFAM support or statement of support to support to our call to free Amanda Echanis and her baby, the Jakarta Feminist and Chris Network were really quick to draft a statement and circulate the statement among the member organizations, no? So they could get the signatures. No? So those kinds of acts of solidarity really mean a lot to, especially to grassroots groups, to grassroots collectives, and to groups that have a lot more to learn and a lot more to experience, a lot more to suffer, and a lot more to grapple with. No? So we all learn from each other. So I cannot emphasize enough the importance of being part of a collective, being part of specifically here in the Philippines, the national democratic struggle, because that struggle, that long struggle has identified the enemies, and all we need is to unite and to work together to face those enemies. Thanks.
Ini nggak ada suaramu, maaf.
Can you hear me now?
Ya, bisa.
Yes, my apa namanya? So, all right. So let's just go to the first question. I want to read the question that was on YouTube. So this question is posted in Bahasa Indonesia. So I will try to answer it, to translate it in English. So they wanted to ask any of you from each country. As we know, the world right now is currently are planning to provide vaccine of COVID-19 to their people. The question is there anyone from CFAM network or maybe any other feminist organization in Southeast Asia that kind of overseeing and also assist the use and also the distributions of this vaccine, because they are worried that the distributions and the use of the vaccine will be gender biased, and the distribution will not be like women and also friendly to women and also other minority group. So maybe there will be discriminations in place during the distributions of the vaccine. So if any of the panelists here maybe have the answer or maybe know someone who's doing this as part of their work as a feminist organization, so please feel free to answer the question. Is there anyone here who wants to try to answer the question? No? Well, if I may, one of the things that we are going to do with the CFAM network is definitely to also provide some recommendations at the end of this year to government, especially the government of the countries that we have that participate in CFAM network itself. So this is one of the things that we will definitely put is aside of, currently letting them know what are the situations that is happening in each of this country in Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia. So maybe in the future we can add more Southeast Asian country to our networks, but definitely this will be one of the recommendations that we are going to put in our final reports on the situations of feminists and also the movement and also women in Southeast Asia as well. So currently, I'm not aware of any organization that is working on this. We know in Indonesia, we have an organization that is called CISD, who is focusing on health, and also they are directly involved, definitely highlighting a lot issues about women's and health, and also especially in COVID-19 pandemic. So maybe you can check them out. So maybe this is something that they will prioritize as well, but this is also definitely will be put in our recommendations at the end of this year. So thank you so much for raising that question. We have more questions actually. So maybe let's go to, I do want to hear from Rian and also Hannah. Kiki here asked a question about the rise of online gender-based violence in education platform, because in Indonesia, because of the pandemic, the student learn virtually, and this lead to so many cases of online gender-based violence where the perpetrator is their lecturer or teacher. So how is the situation there, and maybe how do you handle the situation? Maybe we can start with Rian first.
We've personally never had any cases come to us, but I know there is a very big concern about Zoom bombing. So actually, one of my friends had her lecture Zoom bombed by one of their students actually in class, being very inappropriate. So what we do to handle is we obviously need to take these cases firstly from the first person point of view, from the primary source of the victim, and then after that we try to report this to our Ministry of Multimedia and Communications. On the other side of the spectrum is how gender-based violence online is increasing. We've seen in Malaysia there was this group called V2K that started disseminating pornographic materials and women's pictures without consent. And I'm sure this happens all across the world as well, where people take your pictures and then they post it in a group chat full of, misogynist males. And we also have reported this Telegram group to MCMC. However, the response was very superficial. It obviously the ministry had said, yeah, we have stated this to Interpol and we sent a notice to Telegram, but we're trying to push the government to say, hey, this is not the first group. We need to do something more than this. You can't just make us a report on every single case, because then that's not fighting the root cause of the issue. So I think that's why, again, I would like to emphasize the importance of education. I think that's how we're handling it so far. Yeah.
Thank you, Rian. Hannah, do you want to add to that? Maybe you can tell us what's the situation in the Philippines.
Yeah. Not only in the arena of education, but generally speaking, the gender-based violence in online platforms, I think, actually spiked when the online platform of learning was conducted, especially here in the Philippines. It's because of the fact that first, these perpetrators can easily hide their identities because of the power of the internet. And here at Sulong, what we do is that we always try to release statements in support of the victims. For example, there was this one high school, if I'm not mistaken, it's Taguig Science National High School, which is in Metro Manila, who had an issue surfaced about sexual harassment. So in Sulong, we try our best to use our platform, our audience, to call out their attention so that we can, even if we do not have this direct connection to the organization mentioned, which is Taguig Science National High School, we have to call out their attention so that other people will be able to be aware of what's happening, so that more people will be able to call their attention as well, so that they can realize that unless they do something about it as an institution, nothing will change. So that's one of the things that we contribute a lot in terms of fighting this cases, the spike of cases of gender-based violence online, because it's the best thing we can do right now, considering our situation that we are still under this pandemic, that we do our best, we exercise whatever platform it is that is available for us to call out their attention, because unless the organizations involved do something about it to spark positive change, then these perpetrators will continue to harm victims. So it is in our duty to stand for the victims as always, and make it a habit to call out these institutions attention, for them to realize that unless they step up, nothing will change.
Thank you, Hannah. Chandra, do you want to add to that, especially because you're also a legal advocate? Maybe you have like an other perspective on, especially with what's going on in Indonesia. Chandra? Okay.
I think that's enough.
Okay.
That's same with what we facing in Indonesia.
All right. Thank you so much, Chandra. And I know that like I'm not sure what the situation in the Philippines, but I was in the same panel with WCC Penang from Malaysia, who mentioned that apparently Malaysia has been working for 20 years to pass the anti-sexual violence bills, and we in Indonesia, we have been working for almost 7 years to pass the anti-sexual violence bill. So hopefully that we don't have to go, hopefully it will pass soon in Malaysia, and hopefully we don't have to go for 20 years to pass this anti-sexual violence draft bill in Indonesia. So let's go to another question. Maybe I would ask, maybe Nisa, the questions from Naila here about the conservatism in your country and how it affects your work as feminist organization, and is there any good practices to overcome? Maybe you want to answer it on mic?
Sure. So the conservatism is definitely rising in Malaysia, or I'm not sure if with the word rising, I would say it has remained stagnant, has been the same ever since. Only now that we are getting more liberal ideas, more left ideas coming about, because there are more recognitions of LGBT groups, and there are also recognition of, being against child marriage. And in Malaysia, unfortunately, with the rise of conservatism, or the existence or the majority of conservatism, it doesn't help when feminists are trying to fight for these causes, and want to talk about the sexual harassment bill. We want it to be tabled by the end of this year. We want to ban child marriage, and you would think that child marriage is something that would immediately everyone would understand. Definitely, everybody would just be like, yeah, let's not think twice about it. Unfortunately, that's not the case in Malaysia. We do have conservatives trying to defend this and tell us, no, this is the culture, things like that. But times have evolved, and we have more understanding of children and what they need, and that they need us to protect them and not marry them, which is a huge, whole other issue. And I would say that one of the issues mainly faced by feminists when it comes to facing conservatives would definitely be when we are fighting for LGBT causes. Even just to say that, you shouldn't shame an LGBT person, you shouldn't, you should just let them live, or you should just let them be. Even that poses an issue with conservatives, and it makes our work online much more harder, and it opens door for getting doxxed, getting attacks, and things like that. Also, for our LGBT folks, it's always the risk of getting outed, and this is a very huge issue that still needs discussing. And it's that's the problem, is that we're constantly trying to talk about it, but there's no action. And because when the problem with Malaysia is that liberals, the left, feminists, we are more known in urban cities, because if I'm honest, it's a very privileged position
to acknowledge situations, to learn about empathy, to learn about information, to break from generational curses. So it's so much harder when we want to fight against conservatives in real life. Online, however, I realized that when solidarity is definitely very strong online, and being online is, I would say, I'm not saying that violence doesn't exist. It definitely does. And whenever we have conservatives come online, attacking us or spewing hate, doxing us, and things like that, it definitely equates to violence. And it definitely affects people emotionally and psychologically. However, with online, we can block, we can report the account, which is so much more easier to handle and control rather than in real life, where it can be much, confrontation might be much more harder for some of us. So I would definitely say with the rise of conservatism in Malaysia, the work of feminists is much more harder. And it, like Rian said, we have to be more brave. We have to be more bold in the things that we say, in the things that we want to fight for, because unfortunately there are people who don't believe in what we believe in, despite the fact that it's clearly just human rights. But yeah, that's definitely what's tough about being a feminist in Malaysia. And I'm so sorry that I can't really give you a good solution, apart from just blocking and reporting. It's definitely, I feel like freedom of expression is definitely a double-edged sword. So that's from me.
Thank you, Nisa. But again, it's also it's so hard to find the perfect solutions on this issue, because it cannot just come from us. It has to come from every other people as well. So yes, but thank you so much for your answer. So Faye, do you have anything to say about the growing conservatisms in the Philippines? Maybe.
Not really. I think the stories I told earlier illustrate the how it is in the Philippines now. So I think the level of conservatism here is felt really in the government's anti-communist campaign. So everything, I think a lot of the issues that the Filipino people are facing now really stems from that Cold War, issue, anti-communist issue. So yeah, I think what I want to say now is I'd like for the international community, our sisters, our brothers out there, to help really the Philippines, to help us in our calls for justice. For example, just in this case involving Amanda, no, our human rights defenders being wrongfully imprisoned, and I hope that organizations and collectives abroad can help us, can help amplify our calls for justice, our calls for our human rights defenders to be released, for the government to stop its red tagging and its anti-communist campaign. No? So I think that would really help us a lot.
Thank you, Faye. Vira, mungkin mau nggak mungkin punya perspektif tentang naiknya isu konservatisme di Indonesia. Kalau menurut Vira, kira-kira di Indonesia itu seperti apa sekarang?
Kalau menurut saya di Indonesia saat ini terkait isu-isu tersebut masih berprogres, Kak Vi. Artinya sudah cukup baik juga, cuman di beberapa segmen juga ada sesuatu yang masih kurang. dan tentunya ini perjuangan kita bersama untuk dapat dapat berjuang agar segala sesuatunya menjadi lebih baik sesuai dengan harapan kita bersama. Begitu Kak Vi.
Terima kasih, Vira. So, thank you, everyone. So we still have more question here. There's a new question that was posted by Bella here. And more. But there's one issue that there's so much people disagree about how we're supporting women virtually. What is suggestion to so is it about the woman supporting woman hashtag, or I'm not very sure about the question itself. So maybe Bella, if you wanna open your mic and clarify a little bit about the question. I assume that this is maybe like how there are. Sorry, my mom is here. She's talking to my cat. Yeah, sure. Maybe Bella, you can open your mic and clarify a little bit about the question. Thank you.
Hello?
Bella?
Yeah?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Oh, okay, thanks. So I really want to ask about there's so many things that happen virtually on internet. And internet as a prior social media platform that we use lately. So I really want to know there's so many violence, non-verbal violence that happen on the social media platforms nowadays. And I just want to know about what you guys opinions or suggestions to prevent that actions who can happen to everyone who wants to support all of every woman in Indonesia or maybe in other countries. So I really want to know what is your opinions to prevent that actions. And yeah, that's all. I'm so nervous. I'm sorry.
Don't worry, it's okay. Thank you so much, Bella, for the question. Now I think I get it. It's basically like what Nisa and I think some of us already mentioned here, how the fear of being labeled as feminist itself, kind of like we call it some kind of like a self-censorship, to the point that we are unable to voice our opinion, and also we cannot show people that we support a cause. For example, like Nisa mentioned about like if we only say like it's okay, it's their right to be a part of LGBT groups, and they already like kind of label us as social justice warrior or all of that, like all of that discussion. So maybe anybody here want to answer that question, or maybe have like suggestions on what we can do to be able to support each other's virtually without being afraid of things that will happen to us.
If it's all right, yeah. I think I just want to say this outright. I am a Christian, and in the feminist network itself, I have personally struggled with the fact that I have to listen to LGBTQ plus communities and say, hey, I can't just impose what I believe onto you, because that's not right. That isn't the core value at all of the message that we believe in. It's journeying with people for God. I think what to answer Bella's question is that I first want to reaffirm you and say it's okay to grapple with these things. It's not at all wrong to grapple with these things. I myself doubt and constantly question my beliefs, and I just find answers from there and guidance. Second thing, solutions, I would want to say, I think talking to people first is very important to understand the issue and the community as well. And you need to talk to people who are on the ground, grassroots movements, if you want to learn more about any intersectional issues. You need to trust these people with their knowledge and what they have. Third thing is, don't be afraid, just do it. um, but I know it's definitely easier said than done. Don't take it too fast. Take it slow. Don't pressure yourself to continuously support every single social justice movement. It is definitely not your job. For me, I think as a Christian, my job is to have the right relationship with God and live my life and say, hey, how can I love people the way He has loved me? I want to reaffirm you and say that take it slow, take it easy, and be brave. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rian. Anybody else has want to answer the question from Bella?
Yeah, I would also.
Maybe Faye? Hannah? Who want to say first? I love this. Maybe let's go to other country first. Let's go to Chandra. Chandra, I think you want to say something.
Okay, thank you, Vivi, for let me to add the answer. As a women human rights defender and a frontline in a grassroots movement, I think labeled such labeled as SJW, social justice warrior, or as a feminist or both feminist, uh, just a risk of our struggle and a movement. But still, we have to consider our security, not only our security, but also people around us, like our family member, our parents, or our children. That's the important thing. So yes, I believe we have to brave, but we have to brave with considerate to people around us, and remember the security not just a physical security but also psychological security and also digital security. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chandra. I think it's also very important for us to think about all other things of the security itself. A lot of people, I myself personally had a lot of people saying that if you don't get threat, then you're not feminist or activist enough. I think that's just nonsense. Like when we are campaigning and do, like as Chandra say, like being a frontliners as a human rights defender, I think it is important. The first thing that we need to do is to assess our safety and also security first. So Hannah, do you want to add to that as well?
Yeah, I actually want to share this quote that I heard from a webinar that I attended about gender mainstreaming in the Philippines. One resource speaker shared us this quote from Edmund Burke saying that the only way for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And I think, Bella, to answer your question, that's something that I really want you to keep in mind. In order for us to empower other women, empower the causes that we believe in, we must always remember that we're not only doing this because we stand for what is right and we are advocates for positive change, but also it's because of the fact that we share the same experiences as them. It's because we are all humans. We share in what they are feeling, what they are experiencing, and therefore we must always remember that if you're not gonna stand up for those who needs your voice, then who will stand up on behalf of them? The fight against representation, against equality and inclusivity, it's very hard and sometimes can be even tiring. But what's important is that as long as you empower yourself first, then that's the first step. Then you'll be able to empower other people without the fear of people saying no to your opinion, or people not believing with what you stand in. It's important that you stay true to yourself and you be confident, and as long as your intentions are pure, just like our intentions here in this movement, then we all will be able to empower other people with our small efforts, whether big or small efforts. Thank you, Bella, for that beautiful question.
Thank you. Nisa, do you want to add something before we close the session?
Oh, okay. So I understand how it feels like to be a feminist online and to constantly fight for a cause, and then always being put down, and you feel really burnt out, and you feel tired, and you feel like, what's the point of me just being online doing all this? Nobody's listening to me. One of the best things my boss told me and sort of reminded me was that um, women and feminists will always feel heavier when we do this sort of work. And it's always us who leaves the internet, who leave the political and public participation after an attack. And it's always us feeling this sort of way when the harasser, the aggressors, the trolls online are still going about their day and feeling nothing. So every time I do feel like giving up, being online, and I just want to like be a recluse and never talk again, never say anything again, or never reprimand anyone, I just remember that, because I feel like as a woman, I don't know, I feel like it's a personal thing where I feel like I don't want other women to feel down when they hear my stories and my struggles, and I want them to be able to keep fighting every single day, no matter what, and not to let the aggressors win. So I guess that's my advice. I don't know.
Thank you, Nisa. That's a beautiful advice, actually. And this is also something that we need to remind myself every day. I mean, we all struggle with this issue as well. And thank you, Bella, for raising the question. I think it's all of the answer that came from the panelists. It has become a very good, like a self-reflections toward myself as well. Because sometimes we, the people who has been working in this. Who actually work in this, like Chandra itself is the frontliner, who are probably like Afira, who is directly impacted with all of this issue as well. I felt like it will become a big struggle for us as well. So thank you so much for raising the questions. So that's the end of our discussion today. To wrap up, maybe we all know, based on our discussion, we face a lot of things before the pandemic and even during the pandemic. And from all of the panelists already mentioned, despite all of the horrible things that happened during the pandemic, there are several lights that we can get, and also there's small hopes that we can also keep hoping for, even after the hopefully when the pandemic is over soon, as soon as possible, hopefully. And also to highlight as well, I think it is important for all of us from all around the world to build this very strong solidarity, because we need each other in a sense. If not us, then who else is going to get our back? So once again, thank you very much for all the panelists, Ambassador Kali, who's still here, also all of the participants who's also following this discussion in this Zoom room, and also those who watch us from YouTube Live. And if you wanted to know more about our network, especially the CFAM network, you can visit our Instagram account on CFAM Network. So please check out, because we also routinely will post. Thank you so much, everyone.